Hi, I'm Carol Kelly, Client Services Liaison and also a teacher at AVLI. And I am here to talk with you about interdisciplinary collaboration and also to share a project with you that was made possible through interdisciplinary collaboration and also quite successful because of it. This is a really great time to form partnerships with other teachers. Distance learning and online resources are an important part of interdisciplinary collaboration, so the tools that you're gaining in terms of working with your students online fit really well into this discussion. Also, colleagues are present with you online and connections can be easily made. I realize completely that there's often a bit of hesitation to considering creating interdisciplinary curriculum because it requires a certain amount of teaching and learning, sometimes outside of one's own discipline. So right up front, I will let you know that you're not alone if this seems daunting, but that you'll be well rewarded for your effort. These two resources, which will be available at the end of the presentation, will ease your concerns and provide more than enough inspiration to push through any hesitation you might have. And Houston's book, if you haven't read it, is really insightful, particularly on this topic, and it's really a fun read as well. The first, most important point to be made about interdisciplinary and collaborative teaching is that the idea is central in meeting the goals of Catholic education. In The Jesuit Spirit of Education, the Reverend Wilfrid Lacroix he recounts that Ignatius was an educational experimenter who, while writing the constitutions and developing curricula through creative experimentation, engaged in consultation with his colleagues in order to develop an exchange of pedagogical ideas. Catholic social teaching, and by extension I would say Catholic education, is education that promotes justice, compassion, empathy, and action, and that demands that the students have an open mind, and it demands that the students practice something we call intellectual flexibility. You may have heard of a variety of interdisciplinary models and even actually specific projects that take inspiration from the person who epitomized intellectual flexibility, of course, Leonardo da Vinci. And I'm including a resource on just such a project for you at the end, but just to give you a snapshot of how effective this inspiration can be, and I'm going to quote from their project abstract. It was a 9th grade integrated Leonardo notebook project, co-designed by high school art, mathematics, and science faculty, and taught in conjunction with Cultural History Unit on Renaissance. The aim of the project was to encourage students to think expansively across disciplines and perform like a Renaissance person by producing notes, drawings, and mathematical calculations based on their own observations and experiences. And so a very ambitious project, but I think you can really see how that collaboration would have produced incredible results in terms of student learning and in terms of student intellectual flexibility. A number of years ago, some of us were asked to develop a course on poverty in America. And this came from a speech that Father Kolvenbach gave that was very influential at Santa Clara University. In it, he said that Catholic education must bring students into the world, to let the gritty reality of the world into their own lives. His remarks made a really strong impression on many of us, and the administration at my school began to develop courses that would strive to accomplish this goal and to apply the spirit of collaboration and experimentation that St. Ignatius had advocated. So the course that we developed, called Poverty in America, started with our own academic discipline being front and center, but with collaboration across disciplines as part of the full curriculum. And my background is in the arts, and the example that I'm going to show you led to the course being presented at an International Justice Conference at Fairfield University. Researching and working with colleagues as we planned the course, we discovered many roadblocks. And so we wanted to have something that would meet the bar, all of the bars that we had set for ourselves. And it seemed like interdisciplinary collaboration was the one way that we could do that. It involves cross-discipline curriculum that eliminates siloed learning. Real-world encounters are increased. Creative and logical brain centers are activated, and that increases intellectual flexibility, and models connectedness that addresses some real-world problem solving, and that's bringing the gritty reality of the world into the lives of our students. So I want to share with you a little bit what I shared at the International Justice Conference. And what I'd like to ask is, as you're looking at this presentation and thinking about whether or not you might want to do interdisciplinary collaboration with some of your colleagues or one of your colleagues, that you'll start that process right now and just kind of imagine how you might be able to use a similar prototype in your courses. So on the intellectual flexibility front, it turns out in this subject that long-held myths about poverty in general, and certainly about poverty, in American poverty in particular, seem to have been passed on almost by osmosis to our students. And it became easy to see why this is so. I'd like to show you some quotes that we would show our students, and we would ask them to guess when the statements had been made. Let me show you those quotes. The first reads, "We don't want to turn the safety net into a hammock that lulls able-bodied people to lives of dependency and complacency that drains them of their will and their incentive to make most of their lives." Next quote, "We cannot for our own comfort let people starve and freeze on our streets, but we resent their accepting our largesse while indulging in counterproductive habits, and we know that these would decrease our own productivity and well-being if we so indulged." Third quote, "All of the evils attributable to the current system of poor relief can be traced to the same root, the difficulty of discriminating between the able poor and the impotent poor." And final quote, "The idle will beg in preference to working. Relief is extended to them without suitable discrimination. They are not left to feel the just consequences of their idleness." So interested as the students were by those quotes, they were even more interested when they found out when these quotes had been made. If you look at them, they represent the entire sweep of American history. The first one there, 1998, just after we had reformed welfare, we had launched the Personal Responsibility and Work Opportunity Act. Then we draw all the way back to 1821, the next one, late 19th century. And I actually switched this last one for this presentation. This last quote comes from spring of 2020. So I think you can kind of see how this process of intellectual flexibility is difficult when these are the words spoken by the nation's leaders. How to address that? We put together a group of fields that we thought would be particularly suited to that task, and they were the arts, economics, sociology, theology, and philosophy. The arts as a catalyst for understanding the nature and consequences of the subject, economics as a tool for understanding the broad systems which govern commerce, wealth, poverty, and mobility in society, and then sociology, theology, and philosophy we thought as connective disciplines which foster the wisdom to know why we care, are moved, and why we must act for justice. The related disciplines that came into play, and actually which we found our students contributed to quite a bit, were of course history, math and statistics, and the language arts. Student teams were created and students were free to select the team they wished to join. And that's because student choice is pivotal, I think, in many or at least most cases. But when topics are selected by students and they're allowed to explore them creatively through divergent thinking, discussion, and self-directed projects, interest increases and basic knowledge is then used to produce something innovative. Now that quote comes from a study made about gifted students, but it applies all across the board in terms of fostering student curiosity when they have an opportunity to choose. So we allowed student project teams to be formed by students who had selected which team they wanted to be a part of. While each teacher led their own individual class with a strong focus on their respective discipline, they shared the task of organizing and refining curriculum, and they mentored discipline-specific teams. Surprisingly, I have to say this was much easier than you might think. I know it sounds really complicated and problematic, but in fact, mentoring meetings could be scheduled outside of class time. That turned out to be fine, and they could be really limited in scope. In fact, it's important to limit them in scope. I think we limited them to 3 questions each session, and in-class time grew much more productive because students brought the material in with them. It was almost as though we had created a flipped classroom without even really starting to plan that in advance. Student teams in economics and statistics researched those aspects of poverty in America. Students that were more interested in the arts spent time collecting and analyzing the work of musicians whose lyrics, rhythms, and melodies and harmonies had rendered a musical picture of what it was like to live in poverty in the wealthiest nation on earth. And here are just some of those lyrics. This is a section of lyrics from a piece by Ice Cube. And this is a section of lyrics that one of my students brought in, and it's from the artist Ghostface Killah. The theology and philosophy teams that students selected to be on drew from the words of theologians and great minds and brought that into play. And then finally, context for everything was provided by a wide range of readings from across disciplines again. We read Adam Smith, we read Charles Dickens, we read Susan Laurie Parks, August Wilson, we read E.F. Schumacher, and many others. So now I'm really hoping that you're wondering how you might get started on something collaborative with a colleague at your school, maybe a colleague in this course. And we're all working from a distance, so it's a good time, as I said, to get started. Here's some tips for starting out. First of all, start off small. Make connections with faculty from other departments and just start a conversation, get a conversation going. Small scale implementations and practices can be a great way to start a process in your school that has a tendency to really grow larger like a snowball rolling down a hill. You can invite guest speakers to give a presentation. That's another great way to start off small. And then as time goes on and you develop further, you can partner with faculty from other departments, and you can make use of pedagogies that lend themselves to interdisciplinary teaching. And these kinds of pedagogies involve teaching real-world examples, service learning is important, topical issues and events. All of those offer an opportunity to combine resources from across disciplines. What will you need to get started? You're going to need administrative support. So ask. It can't hurt, and it might turn out better than you think. And most administrations are very much in support of it, and it helps if you come in and just say, hey, we'd like to investigate this, we'd like to research this possibility. You need time to collaborate, and I say see above because you have to ask for some administrative support for that. You need intellectual flexibility as well because you're going to be looking across disciplines and new ideas are bound to appear before you and you want to consider them. You need research preparation and a number of projects. This pertains to what you will have in your class. You want to refine the scope of what you're going to tackle, and that depends on how many different disciplines you decide to incorporate. And then you always need respect, openness, and communication when working with colleagues. Once you get a project started and it's in the development stage, you also really want to think about what do students need. Students will need project guidance to narrow their scope. When they get really excited about something, as we all know, that they sort of, they have a wide range, wide scope. You want to help them narrow that scope so that what they are looking at and what they are studying is manageable. They need a modicum of assistance with shared self-directed work time in teams. And again, you can ask for some help with that from the administration. But I say modicum because it turns out that they do pretty well monitoring their own time and working ahead. And then they also need the freedom to search, to debate, and reflect. Especially if you're dealing with a real world issue, a hot button topic, you want to make sure that you build in that time for reflection for them. What are the rewards that you can expect? I've compiled these from my own experience and also from some of the resources that I'm providing that will be available to you after the presentation and through the online resources of the course. But the rewards are these. This is only some of them as well. Deeper connection with students. I almost can't express how profound it was to work with small groups of students on something that was being driven by their curiosity and their need to serve. Students connected to one another. The students get to know each other pretty well, and when they've chosen which team they wish to be a part of, especially if they've chosen to collaborate among themselves across disciplines within each team, they get to know each other and they get connected to one another. And because they're looking outside themselves, that connectedness takes on a whole different level than it would in just a regular class format. Collegial support, great reward. Greater understanding of another subject area, which is fun. Revived interest in your own subject area. As you learn things about other subject areas and you start to combine forces with other colleagues, at least I found that it inspired me in ways that, in some ways that I hadn't felt since I was in graduate school. And student engagement across disciplines, and them looking at their education from a holistic perspective, which is ultimately the goal, of course. So these are the two resources I mentioned at the top, and they will be available through the course that you're taking now, but check them out, and I hope you will consider doing a project or at least starting a conversation for a project for interdisciplinary collaboration at your school. Thanks. Thank you so much for watching, and if you want any more information about that particular project that I used in the example, please don't hesitate to contact me, and please do check out the resources that are attached. It's very inspiring, particularly the teaching channel video of the project that they created is really inspiring, so make sure to check those out, and good luck, and we'll be with you, and we're here to serve, so just let us know how we can help. Thanks so much. Bye.